Ladies and gentlemen, this is the state of the scene.
Yo, what the fuck is up, Warped Tour? The state of the scene at SOTS Podcast on all social media. Sam here with Marcos.
What's good?
What's good?
It's good.
Bro, every time you ask me that, it's like a existential question, you know what I mean? I'm sitting here and I'm just like, what is good? Is anything good? Am I good? Are we good? You know what I mean?
Are we good?
I don't know, bro. Been pissing me off lately.
Shaky relationship over here on the show.
We're going to do a little bit of what we did last week, Marcos, where we actually flip things around, do news up at the top, and then close out the episode with a big, fat old review of just one album this time because it's so goddamn long, which would be the Concrete Jungle OST by Bad Omens.
Right. Essentially 3 albums in one.
Yeah. It's a what do they call a double album? It's a triple album. It's literally a triple album.
Triple album.
It was right there. It shouldn't have been that hard for you to like figure out.
Right
You
there.
know what I mean? It's late. I'm tired.
But no,
We're a podcast. It's a scene. Let's fucking go. So we're gonna start with just some pre-intro topics to get us warmed up before we get into like Patreon questions, the actual news, and then end with the review. Before we do all that, Marcos, I have to tell somebody about this because it's been driving me insane. I've been watching One Tree Hill. I don't know if you're familiar.
I thought we didn't do this shit anymore.
No, we're doing this shit right now. Dog. We're doing this shit right now. We're doing this shit right now.
Give me the lowdown on One Tree Hill.
It's just like I'm not going to get you up to speed with like everything because I'm talking about like season 2 finale. But here's what you need to know real quick so that like you have some context here. At the end of the finale of season 2, a character walks into the music club / bar that one of the other characters runs and introduces themselves. And the character running the bar is like, "Who are you? Who do I know you?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm a writer for Alt Press." Bro, I stopped. I was gagged.
You were. Oh, no,
I was gagged.
Don't. You weren't gagged.
What, does that mean what I think it means?
No, it does. I think.
I was gagged.
You were straight up
Bro,
gagged. No lie?
Yeah. No, I've never been gagged harder. I didn't know.
I was worried you were gonna say I'm a podcaster, and it was like the first like moment in media history.
No, that's season
like,
3. That's season 3. Season 3. Mouth starts a basketball podcast about his local high school team. Yeah, his name's Mouth. Because he talks a lot. It's a whole... I can't get you fucking caught up on everything. I need you to go with me here. All you need to know is that earlier during the season 2 finale, Jimmy Eat World played like a fucking 12-song set. And they like literally let them like play out at least 1 or 2 songs in their entirety on the episode. It was fucking crazy.
Okay.
Insane
Good?
show. Is Jimmy Eat World good? Yes.
No,
Jimmy Eat World's good.
Good season finale?
Terrible season.
Oh.
Season finale saved it a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. Season finale saved it.
Jimmy
a
Eat
little
World
bit.
in their clutch.
My interest. I just didn't realize that. Like, I knew Alt Press was like relatively popular, but I didn't know it ever had like such cultural relevance that it would just show up in like a major broadcast TV show this way. And you're just meant to like know what the fuck that is.
Barely related.
Sure.
Going around this week was a screenshot of that Jimmy Eat World's that album's rating on Pitchfork.
How can I guess?
Released?
Can I guess? 6.2.
Lower. It was like I want to say it was like a 4.1 or some shit.
Bro, that's like half the Peppa the Pig album.
I was gonna ask if you liked it.
That's
not
insane.
Not the Peppa the Pig album.
That's fucking wild. This is gonna be the album like with the sweetness on it, and then like the
the trophy,
the lingerie
stuff.
song or whatever. Yeah, no,
like
that
the
album's,
artwork. Yeah,
I don't know if I've ever heard that album in full. Now that you mentioned it, like I've always been a Jimmy Eat World fan, but I don't know that I ever really like dove into that.
They didn't play it in full on One Tree Hill.
I was big. You're right. Maybe I have heard it now that you mention it by virtue of having watched that episode. Anyways, Marcos Amir started a beef with Alpha Wolf.
They just can't fucking help themselves, Sam.
Frankie Palmieri just really like. It's funny. I'll go back and look at like old news to find like stuff to share on our podcast page on Twitter at SOTS Podcast.
All right, don't spoil how we do that.
And every like 2 months, there's like a story in the news that's like Frankie Palmieri fucking takes a shot at so-and-so, or like takes a shot at all of metalcore, or like gets involved in some controversy, like fucking Clockwork, bro.
Right. Some random ass bands like Frankie Palmieri and fucking Jimmy Eat World bury the hatchet.
Frankie Palmieri and the Offspring go at it during Warped Tour. It's like, okay. This dude just loves talking shit. So this week he posted on Twitter, this is the tour, Amur, Unity, Texas, Chamber. And he's referring to the Alpha Wolf headlining tour that they're all supporting, which is so fucking funny.
Which is now over.
Yeah, it is over.
Which is my favorite part of this whole thing. It's like, wait until the last fucking day.
You've been holding it in.
I think it's a bitch move.
Alpha Wolf bassist John Arnold clapped back. Shout out to our support bands, which is very funny. Very funny. Yeah. And then Frankie responded, thank you. We had a blast. Outselling you, outplaying you, just overall crushing it. Sorry, half the crowd left last night. Always next time, bro. Where the fuck does this come from? It's so funny.
Rookie move on Alpha Wolf's part.
What, engaging?
It was, what is it? Game, set, match or whatever, or like hook, line, sinker as far as like baiting goes.
You're right. Like just by responding, they've already lost the fight.
No, the moment that they like acknowledged it, he already had that one in the chamber.
Fair point.
Not only did he have this band in his sights, when they accepted this bill, they're like, I got to start beef with this band because he can't help himself.
A lot of people have said this. Frankie Palmieri, the Kendrick Lamar of the scene. A lot of people have said this.
Well, maybe.
Many people have been saying this.
They both wear white T-shirts.
That's true.
So
yeah,
this is my angle here is that this is Alpha Wolf getting knighted. Like you're not
like Frankie doesn't respect you unless he's disrespecting you.
Right. You're not like a real big fucking hitter. You're not a big headliner in this scene.
Sure.
Unless you've had your Amur beef.
Sure. That's fair. That's a good point.
It's a rite of passage almost.
I love the idea that Amur finishes every tour by dissing the fucking headlining act. It would be a really fun way to just like keep all of this bullshit going. Marcus Miss may have lost both of their guitarists, Justin Comp, forgive me if I mispronounce that, and BJ Stead, and they picked up new guitarist Alicia Mullins, still remaining in the band, also Levi Benton, Ryan Neff, and Jared Boyd.
Related?
Related to who?
Maddie? Mullins?
That is such a good fucking question. That is such a good fucking question.
Look, music probably runs, in their veins in that family, the Mullins family.
It's weird that I didn't even...
far off.
It's weird
Cousin,
that I didn't
distant?
even... There aren't a lot of... This doesn't happen often, right?
It doesn't.
This doesn't happen often, right? Is Mullins that rare of a last name? If this was like Sykes,
I think so.
I'd be like, or Motionless, I'd be like, yeah, he's got to be related. Motionless. You know what I mean? They got to be related. Like, there's no way they're not. Mullins, that could be common.
What's the gut reaction to this? Miss May I drop 2 guitarists, pick up another.
You know what it is.
It's not much because Miss May I's barely active.
They are about to go on a 15-year tour, but yes, in some capacity, Miss May I feel is a little less active than many bands that they came up with. More active than some, though.
That's a great point, Sam.
A lot of bands I came up with aren't even together anymore. Actually, now that you think about it, I mean, this is just like getting old in the scene, right? Like you just at this point you're just in the game long enough to see your favorite band slowly lose members, slowly become less active, all of this other bullshit.
Miss
May
you
just get used to it.
Quietly, actually,
what?
A lot of the same members since their beginning, right? These are founding members we lost, maybe.
So in that sense, you can be like, oh damn, man. Hate to see any cracks in the foundation there. We had an incredible run. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it just is what it is. This shit just happens,
I mean, I think here there were cracks in the foundation. It just didn't yet result in anything.
Is it Ryan who's literally a fucking member of
As I Lay Dying.
As I Lay Dying, yeah. Who had like a new song fairly recently as well.
Essentially playing the exact same role in that band as he does in Miss May I, which
He's good at it.
A little funny.
He's good at it. You don't get a second job. Well, maybe you do get a second job.
I'm just saying, it's not like they just brought him in for vocals. It's like you also have to play the guitar.
Yeah.
Or bass, probably.
I mean, that's why you bring that guy in, though, right? Like, you probably go out and you get that guy for that specific reason because he's talented at, like, those two things, and that's, like, the hole you're trying to fill. As I Lay Dying doesn't even have, like, the fucking rebooted original member. Like, that band is, like, literally just Tim, right? And, like, three other, like, dudes who were never a part of As I Lay Dying in the past. Is that fair?
I think that's accurate.
Marcus, Oli Sykes has been doing the interview rounds, and he shared some thoughts on the rumored Billie Eilish collaboration and the departure of Jordan Fish. Marcus, we'll start with the Billie Eilish stuff.
No one fucking asked, bro. We want to know what's going on with the Post Malone one. That's where we're all at.
Talking to Daniel P. Carter, Billie's Ollie mentions that Billie's photographer is a massive Bring Me the Horizon fan, and mentioned to him Billie potentially doing a song. So Ollie sent Limousine to Billie. And he's not positive that she listened to it, but he is certain that she got it, which is very funny.
I hate this shit.
What do you mean you hate this shit? What do you hate about it?
Bro, what are we talking about? We're not even certain she's heard the song. Already it's out now, too.
Probably because she never responded. But all of this came from, like, him commenting on one of her posts, Limousine, which is now maybe even funnier in context because it's like, hey.
It's double texting.
Hopefully this fucking rings a bell.
Right.
It is double texting.
Yeah.
It really is double texting. And then, he talked about later on, Aurora reached out to us. And apparently there was somebody else that they almost went with as well, but he doesn't specify the name. In an interview with Revolver on his relationship with Jordan Fish, as well as the rest of the band.
Pause. Did Limousine get anything?
What do you mean, did Limousine get
Did it get
anything?
a feature?
Yeah, it has Aurora on it. What the fuck are you talking about?
It has Aurora.
Right?
Got
we literally
it.
reviewed that album last week. Bro. You got the memory of
it's got 12
fucking
songs, 16 songs, something like that.
Ghost of like the fucking
Goldfish.
dead goldfish, dog. You get the memory. You see that video of a goldfish like locked in on like a snapping turtle that's about to eat it, bro? That's your fucking
Downtown
memory,
Battle Mountain B-side.
Have you heard from Jordan since the album came out? Asks Revolver. No, not directly, answers Ollie. I'm not going to bullshit and say, oh, it was amicable and we all ended on good terms and stuff. End of day, it's like any breakup, but there's no juicy story or anything. That's what somebody who has a juicy story says, by the way, every fucking time. There's no headline there. Same. At the same time, there'll be some wounds on both sides, and they're going to take a bit longer to heal before getting back on communicating terms again, but it's not something that I've ruled out. Which makes it seem like the ball is in Ollie's court in this instance.
I don't know. This is weird because you're right. There is something to this.
Yeah.
Because you've accidentally stumbled into it. Like, it's like any breakup, no big juicy story or anything. And then talking about like, you're not on communicating terms again. It's not because one of you were like still passionately in love with the other and one was just like, peace, I'm out. I mean, I guess maybe, but like
maybe with all the context we've been given, I guess that's a narrative you could like spin.
It's just like, okay, it was an amicable split.
Amicable.
It was an amicable split.
You just like to sound your words.
It's late
out,
in the night, amicable split.
Yeah.
But you're not on speaking terms.
Amicable?
Like, I don't know. I don't see it.
I don't know either, but like maybe 3 years from now we get a picture of them two like hugging it out and the internet can rejoice. A lot of people
we knew this was the case, right? But it still hurts to actually see it acknowledged.
I mean, we did know that was the case. Somebody posted a thread a while back that was like, here's why I think this song is on the album is about Jordan Fish, and like 7 like fucking post breakdown, and then we get something like this and it's like, oh, it's not a big deal. Friends fight.
Right.
It's like, all right, if you say so. Friends. As always, every link you need is in the description of this episode, including our socials, playlist, merch, and Discord. Subscribe to us on YouTube at SOTS Podcast YT. Leave a thumbs up if you're watching the video version of the show. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave 5 stars. It helps.
It does.
Margos, if you want to support the show, consider becoming a patron for exclusive content, the ability to submit questions to the show, and producer credits on all of our video content.
It helps.
It does. It's the end of May, and we made a valiant attempt to reach 50 new patrons.
Did we get there?
We got like 2/3 of the way there, which I'll take, and I appreciate everyone's support, Margos. Final shout-outs for the month go to Oscar M, J, Katarina D, Laura Z, Kristen W, Brittany M, Casey C, Casey M, Cassie C, Casey M, Sarah, Sinful Sil, and Chris S. Thank you all. We appreciate your support. Marcus patrons also receive access to bonus podcasts, SOTS Deluxe. On this week's Deluxe, Marcus, we talk the return new single from Barry tomorrow. Rising hardcore stars Speed busting out a fucking flute in their new single, and disgustingly heavy new deathcore band on Rise Records called Crucifixion.
Tune in.
Patrons can also submit suggestions for our weekly YouTube show, Ranking the Scene, which drops every Wednesday, Marcos. We bring 3 new albums to the ever-growing tier list to find out the best album in the scene, and coincidentally, the worst. This week, A Day to Remember, The Story So Far, and Reliant K. Good mix.
Crazy
Good mix. That was a fun mix. I had a lot of fun listening to those albums this week, Marcos. Once again, patreon.com/SOTS podcast. If you want to write into the show and ask a question like Caillou, who he wants to know what our go-to concert fit is, and if we have a specific pair of Vans that we only wear to show. Marcos, I'll defer to you.
It's cozy core, right? Like I don't go out of my way. I'm not throwing on like the craziest fit I own. It's typically black jeans, black hoodie, probably a beanie, probably a hat. And then I'll go with a pair of sneakers, just like a beat up pair. I got some Adidas on. It's just 3 stripes. That's it.
I now give significantly less of a shit than I used to. But my move used to like in the past, my move would be wear a band shirt, but not a band that's playing, but a band that I think people attending this show would respect me for wearing. You know, back when I like really gave a shit about like what people thought of me like out in public.
I feel like I almost do that on a subconscious level nowadays, but I will always go out of my way to wear like a pop punk shirt if I'm going to a metal show, or a metal band if I'm going to like a pop punk show.
Right, because you just want to be like ironic or some shit?
I guess.
Okay.
I want to show them like I'm a little different. You know?
I change it up for every show, though. You'll never catch me at a show in the same outfit. Promise that. Whitney asks, curious as to your thoughts on what some of the community has brought up concerning the similarities in the Bad Omens OST and Bring Me the Horizon's new album, specifically the formatting, as though you'd found a thumb drive / the way it's laid out. Personally, it's just that both bands are into the sci-fi dystopian worlds, and it seems like everyone compares Bad Omens to Bring Me the Horizon regardless, but would like to hear your thoughts.
I mean, I've got a Bad Omens Bring Me comparison up my sleeve that I'm saving for the review that's unrelated to this.
Okay.
And not just for the sake of irony, because, you know, time's a flat circle and it's fun to compare those two bands. Even though it's been like 8 years since they've both existed in this scene.
Fair. Oh my God, I just realized that we're doing it all over again. We're fucking, like, they walked me right into it. Whitney fucking...
Right. Yeah, this is...
Pulled the rug out from under, like I wasn't paying close enough attention. Got me to compare Bring Me to Bad Omens without even fucking trying.
Everybody gets one. You know, Bad Omens jacked Bring Me's style when they first started, and Bring Me said, oi, mate, it's our turn now.
So you're saying like early on Bad Omens was jacked Bring Me the Horizon, now Bring Me the Horizon
straight up
has jacked
them.
Bad Omens, and like this scene is like a flat circle and everyone is sort of taking inspiration from one another constantly.
Yeah, I don't know. This is like a non-story to me in the sense that like Bad Omens did not create this file log system thing. Neither did Bring Me. For all we know, they could have been inspired by completely different projects or media, whatever, and sort of landed at the same thing. But I mean, this is an IP from either of these bands anyway, intellectual property. So it's not like there's any real claim. That's for the real sickos out there. That's what IP stands for. There's no claim here. Like I don't think Bad Omens can say like, hey, we invented file logs or whatever.
Fair, but we're definitely noticing like a slight bit of a trend. I mean, they both also do that thing where it's like have a like computer generated like mascot who kind of like talks to you in some capacity, right? I think these are just things that are kind of like popular in like culture, like this sort of like sci-fi, sort of like AI creation thing right now. And they're just both like, they know how to stay relevant in their like marketing. You know what I mean?
I think the closest that Bring Me gets to jacking anything from Bad Omens here is like the OST thing. But also, like, I don't know, again, OST is literally its own term. It's original soundtrack. Like, that is movie soundtracks, game soundtrack. That's not a new term either. So, new to the scene, maybe, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to see these sort of like aesthetics kind of like wash through the scene, and a lot of bands sort of like attach themselves to it all at the same time. But you also see a lot of artists doing it as well. And a lot of these bands work with the same artists and marketing teams that like package their stuff together and stuff. So it's not like crazy, right?
Yeah.
Like we're just living in a very specific time where all of these like mediums are sort of like intersecting, and like here's what's popular and what art styles and like presentations are.
Oli
like the
starts...
fucking CD packaging looking like a fucking video game and shit like that. Like we see Static Dress do it, and then we see Bring Me do it, and it's just like these are just things that like in popular culture have a lot of like cachet right now, you know what I mean?
And then you're forgetting that like Cult did this like 5 years ago or 4 years ago.
100%.
And before then, like there was a Juice WRLD album that was a straight up PS2 cover, and now Megan Thee Stallion's doing this essentially, right? Like these are just things.
They're just aesthetics.
It's fun. I don't know.
Casey asks, have you guys seen any of the speculation going around in the 21 Pilots community about Clancy possibly being a double album or getting a supplementary EP or big deluxe edition coming soon? I don't even have the capacity to understand most of the cryptic clues people are seeing, but from what I've seen, it mostly has to do with the number 25 showing up everywhere, and Tyler and Josh both tweeting or otherwise posting cryptic messages or random letters or jumbled up song lyrics. Josh posting something on his Instagram saying 6.25 miles on it, and a puzzle appearing at the fan premiere exhibit that's spelled out Clancy Ultimus Capitulus 25, which translates to Clancy Ultimate Chapter 25, Clancy Final Chapter 25. What do you guys think about all this? Marcos, I'll start. I would be really excited at the idea of this, that this might actually be more involved, you know, after all of our discussion about lore and like all of this sort of like finality that we kind of wish we had, the way the album ends, the fact that we haven't gotten the final music video yet. Like I hope that all of these things come to fruition, and I trust that 21 Pilots fans aren't seeing smoke where there is no fire.
I mean, I think they don't typically see smoke where there is no fire. I think for the most part, 21 Pilots fans are pretty good at picking up what this band is hinting towards.
And 21 Pilots is pretty good at teeing up for them, right? So if they're posting cryptic messages, it probably is because, granted, we don't know if it could be a double album or a deluxe or a supplementary EP, or it's just leading to like the final music video, which they already promised for June.
Two things here.
Is it an OST? Is it the Clancy OST?
It's the Clancy OST.
Yeah,
I can't believe you fucking beat me to it.
Pipe.
And I would be very open to the idea of a secret double album that drops straight after, mostly because I feel like while I like Paladin Straight, it sort of ends the album with not as big of a bang as I would like it to.
I want a title track called Clancy and it to be the fucking final song.
Right. I want to hear Blurryface die.
All right, well, that feels too far. That feels slightly too far.
I want to hear Ned kill himself.
Browning asks, is moshing out and shaking your ass in with metalcore now? If not, can we please make it a thing? Example, Electric Callboy and Baby Metal in the OST.
Why pit two bad bitches against each other? Moshing and shaking ass can coexist, okay?
Yeah, I agree.
Let's all get on the same fucking page. Electric Callboy X Baby Metal and the OST. I'm so tired of the OST now.
You're already singing the OST, bro. We're barely getting into the OST. There's no way we don't get 40 more of these before the fucking
end. The two
of...
fucking big ones did it. If I get to fucking Take Me Back to Eden OST, I retire from this scene.
It'd be sick though. It'd be so sick.
It's been here. We've got like the fucking baddie core thing. We've had Scene Queen, like that's their mission statement. Like shaking ass in this scene is in.
Shaking ass is in. You heard it here first. Andrew W. asked, do you think Bad Omens may have set the bar too high with The Death of Peace of Mind? I feel that there's an unimaginable expectation for them to put out a new album of equal quality or better once the Concrete Forever cycle is done. You know what's funny about this, Andrew W., is I think this is the most self-aware the scene has ever been before, because we constantly live in this era of nostalgia in the scene where we look at every band and say, this album from this era is their best and they've never been able to top it. And now we're in this instance right now where we're staring down the barrel of one of the greatest albums ever dropped in this scene and being like, fuck, will it ever get better than this? Or are we just going to say this is the death of peace of mind for 10 to 20 fucking years?
Yeah, we're in peak right now. It's all over after this.
Yeah.
I don't...
The self-awareness of realizing you're existing in peak. By Bad Omens.
Or like Moths to Flames.
Yeah, sure.
I guess I don't like the question because...
Okay.
No, well, let me... I don't like the idea that Bad Omens has set the bar too high with the death of peace of mind because it almost sounds like they intentionally did that when, like, if that album didn't blow up in the way that it did, we're probably already on to the next cycle by now, and it probably is bigger and better.
That's a very interesting theory.
And it's essentially like trying to punish this band for not realizing, or us not realizing, the gold they were sitting on initially. But like, as far as concerns that this band is not going to be capable of writing a record as good as that one, I don't have that. And granted, a lot of those concerns have been not to show
alleviated by the OST,
right? With tracks like The Drain and Van, like that is not a concern. Are Bad Omens incapable of writing good songs suddenly? Not the case. The next album is going to be awesome. I'm not worried, especially with Bad Omens. Of all the bands in the scene in which I get concerned when it's time to like start releasing singles for the next album cycle, it's not Bad Omens. It's not going to be Bad Omens anytime soon. They have not misstepped in any way, in my opinion.
Yeah, that
would lead to any sort of fear on my part as far as the quality of music they might ever produce. I think this band's ceiling has been shattered, and at this point, it's sky's the limit. And I cannot see them stopping or getting any worse or not making their magnum opus on this next album cycle. Like, those are not concerns of mine.
But it's funny because living through the scene, you can go back a million times over and see instances where you could relay those same feelings and see it happen over and over again.
I don't know. Like, ask yourself, like, with the fucking Bring Me the Horizon.
Let's do a different one. Think about a band like Pierce the Veil, who dropped something like Collide with the Sky, which is absolutely massive. It's
when I finished that album a year later, and I'm thinking to myself, like, oh, this band's got to gear up and do the next thing. I wasn't worried they would release Misadventures. Like, they would end up doing that, and it sucked.
But that's the point I'm making, is that you weren't worried, but it is entirely feasible. A lot of bands deal with this all the time. I mean, think about like following up the Black Parade with like Danger Days, like stuff like this. Like, it is so difficult to maintain that level of like renown, like beloved adoration and critical reception and popularity and all these other things. I mean, I'm sure that weighs on every band, you know what I mean? Like, especially one like Bad Omens, who have certainly seen, like, I would imagine a band like Sleep Token is even looking like Take Me Back to Eden and like, fuck, I gotta follow that shit up. Like,
well, maybe then Bring Me the Horizon is the good example, because I don't dread anything that they do next. I'm already looking forward to the next Bring Me thing. I'm not at all worried that Posthuman 2 is peak. Fair. I wasn't worried Posthuman 1 was peak. I wasn't worried fucking There Is a Hell was peak.
I think we need to probably break ourselves of this idea that if a band's next album isn't better than their previous album, then it's not good. Like, I just think that like bands don't have to exist in a universe where they have to constantly being out doing themselves, but that they can have a natural high and then come down from that and then ebb and flow from there. And I think if we break ourselves of that thinking, we'd probably enjoy many more bands and much more albums than we already are.
What I will say is I think that people should pay closer attention to that OST, because I think it is a preview into what that band is going to sound like in the future. in the sense that I do not think we will get another album that sounds anything like The Death of Peace of Mind.
Okay, fair.
I think like we are going to continue moving forward into exploring very, very different sounds.
Brandon K asks, Monster has started selling Tour Water to compete with Liquid Death. However, they're using the Warped Tour logo and imagery on the cans. Is this a hint for Warped Tour 2025?
I mean, that's nostalgia, right? Like, that's what we all remember Monster Energy Tour Water from. It's just a play on that. Would I like it to ultimately be a hint at Warp 2025? Sure. I'm at the point where I guess I don't think we really need that to ever come back as much as I would like it to. Like, I think that ship has sailed for me.
No, Brandon, it's not a hint, but assuredly Warped Tour will come back in some sort of capacity because the brand name is strong enough that they can use it to either sell an individual festival or sell another run of dates. The same way that we're getting like Mayhem Festival announced like within this year or so. I think it's Mayhem is getting like one date this year and then like a full run next year. Like this shit will just always come back.
What did Lyman say about we had to wait until like 2025 for something naming related for Warped Tour to be available again?
Some level of branding rights, maybe?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly either. Marcus Positive Metalhead asks, how do you feel you have developed your ability to objectively review music, to recognize the difference between something that is actually poorly done versus something that just isn't for you? I mean, for me, I think the biggest growth when it comes to reviewing albums is that I've learned properly how to express my feelings in a way that is significantly more coherent than how I used to present them, and is much more thoughtful and considerate in a way that I don't say something is trash or garbage unless I truly have strong feelings about it in that capacity, but instead have developed the language to be much more nuanced when discussing albums. Second thing, I also think that we use the term review very loosely on this show. Ultimately, what we're giving you are just our impressions of the album. Usually after having spent like significantly less time with it than I generally would prefer if I were to actually settle in on something that I would quantify as a review. Review is just good shorthand. When I talk about albums, I really just like to sort of give my opinions, but don't really want to say, hey, is this album based off of like the musical merit of these artists truly good? No, I'm just letting you know how I feel. Like, that's ultimately what that is. I always like to think of the way I review albums as like watching Guy Fieri on Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives walk into a restaurant and just like take a bite out of a burger. I'm just telling you in that moment how it tastes and how it feels, but I'm not going back and using some sort of like immense brain power to truly like break down and break apart a record.
Right. You're not
like,
going Gordon Ramsay mode and going and checking on like the freezer and checking checking to see if they have mouse traps in the kitchen.
Yeah. The difference is that I might actually tell you if something is bad, whereas I perceive most of those people are just sort of like hype men for general things that they enjoy, in the same way that a lot of content creators that are generally just, you know, expressing positive opinions about everything because, you know, that's the kind of content you come to them to find. I will be more critical in a sense that I will also discuss something that I dislike, but I'll never consider myself someone of like Anthony Fantano's level, who has a significantly deeper understanding of music and is probably considerably smarter than I am. I won't compare what I do to a Pitchfork review. You know what I mean? I'm just like, that's not what I'm doing here. I'm just expressing my opinions on the things I, you know, enjoy or don't enjoy or so on and so forth.
I mean, I think that when you alluded to the fact that like you said it directly, like we don't review albums, we discuss them, and I think like at some point we had to really come to terms with that being the case.
Yeah.
And in doing so, I think the product that is those discussions, those reviews have improved, and our critiques and our takes have improved as a result, regardless of the band, because we realize we're not putting a stamp on this and saying like, hey, here's the official word out on this album. It's more, hey, who we thought you were, just two guys who enjoy the music in the scene. We either liked this or we didn't like it, and here's as much context as to why that is that we can provide. And then at the end of the day, our opinion doesn't really matter. Go make your own. Go actually listen to this stuff. I think that's always been a point. Like, I remember when we were doing playlists consistently, and like we would do like a weekly one for the show, I always wanted to make an effort to include a song that we critiqued. So if it was a song that we thought was bad, we're still playlisting it and trying to get people to listen to it, because we thought it was an important part of the episode, that review, that discussion. And that although we didn't like it, we still thought it was worth hearing, just so that you could form your own opinion on it. Just because we didn't like it doesn't mean you have to dislike it as well, which is why it's more of like a neutral thing. Like, hey, we're going to include this in the playlist. Just listen to it. If you hate it too, you hate it too. But if you liked it, then weigh that against what we're saying. And at the end of the day, what I want people to be able to do is figure out how closely their tastes align with ours, so that they can then, when we review a much smaller act than a Bad Omens, a Bring Me, a 21 Pilots, bands that people are already familiar with, they can go say, hey, well, these guys really like See You Space Cowboy. I'm typically on their wavelength. I gotta go check out this album. That's the service that I hope we provide when we discuss albums on the show.
Yeah, that, and you know what I always wanted when I was younger is to be able to go somewhere and hear people discussing the things that I was interested in, and that's like the type of forum I hope to like deliver to people here. Logan asks best/favorite album closers. They shout out "You Slid" by Sleep Token, "Don't Ask" by Alpha Wolf, "Famous Last Words" by MCR, and what, in our opinion, constitutes a great closing track? I'll start here. One of my favorite closers of all time is the track "Re" by Emarosa on the album 181.
131.
131. Thank you.
Jesus.
Please.
Jesus.
Please. Calm down. Ultimately, what I really like that closer does, and what I really, really like when any other closer does it, is when it sort of like takes the entirety of the experience and sort of like has a culmination of it all in one singular track and calls back to individual songs and wraps its way back into the intro. I think that way it really like it sort of like puts a really fine like exclamation point on a record and everything that you've just listened to. Like for me, that's really like incredible. And then I've always been very fond of the very long contemplative closers that just like take a moment to be a bit more abstract and do something out of the ordinary.
Songs that
those are my
breathe a little
ideals.
bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, mostly what you had to say, a couple of notes on that, or a couple of follow-ups there. Was it the Used who did it on artwork too? Or was that not the closer?
That sounds right, but I don't have the confidence to say
what
for
Emarosa
sure.
did, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, I guess I look for something... Back in the day, I always looked for something really grand. Like, let me know that this album is ending. We talked earlier about Clancy, how Paladin Strait is a good song, but I want it to end with a bang, especially if you're telling me that that is the end of essentially an era of the band, you know, closing a trilogy out. I like the contemplative side as well. I don't ultimately know where I land now, because when I think of closers, more recent ones in my head, it's all over the place. One that really sticks out to me, and it's a track I can barely listen to because it's really emotional, but The Day That I Ruined Your Life by Boston Manor off Welcome to the Neighborhood. Just I guess the biggest thing I look for in a closer is probably just emotion at some point, whether that is emotion from the artist, emotion that it elicits out of me in some capacities, something like that. Map Change by Every Time I Die is a good one. And part of it's just, it's got like one of the coolest riffs that band's ever written, but like that song also has like it lives on a different plane to me, because I know that that's like the song they tried to close Warped Tour out in general on.
Mm-hmm.
And like they kept that riff alive for like 8 minutes longer than it had any right to be. And so like there's a way that like a song can take on a second life outside of the album in a way that I think sticks out to me.
It should say something. There are
contemplative songs.
Like an album closer should say something,
right? There are contemplative songs like A Fire on a Hill by Hands Like Houses from Unimagine?
Yes.
Yeah. Right, yeah, because it's not Dissonance, it's Unimagine. But I don't know, because yes, like part of me does want like a big grand closer, but like those are the ones that immediately jump out to me. I think of like Memento Mori too by Architects, and that's just like definitely like a longer slow burn one. It's like 8 minutes long. I'm trying to think of other big ones that I mean, Famous Last Words is like a great example too, right? Because off of Black Parade, it ends the album on a bang, literally. And I also love like the hidden track that some bands do as well, like because Blood is that, like technically the closer, because
we're kind of going to get into it with the OST as well. Marcus, and finally, no, not finally, Luke B asks, good day lads, how you going? Which I guess is something Australian people say. Shout out Luke. Love you. Welcome back.
No, how ya going, Luke? How are you going?
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, we're gonna throw it right back at you.
Let us know on Patreon.
But appreciate your support, Luke. Luke Burns, longtime supporter of the show, Marcos. And finally, Sam C has no question this week. They're just really looking forward to hearing our thoughts on Bad Omens and which songs we like the best. Marcos, we'll get into that. But first, as always, the news is brought to you by Shibori Threads, the clothing label of the alternative music scene, Marcos, as well as this week, the greatest hits album by Creed, which you can get now on Craft Recordings. If you're watching the video version of the show, sitting right behind us, Marcos, it's got Higher.
What else?
It's got With Arms Wide Open. It's got the fucking Heaters.
All of them.
The news.
A Day to Remember return with new single, Feedback.
Peace.
The band are set to deliver the follow-up to 2021 album, You're Welcome. Their first full-length release for Fueled by Ramen, You're Welcome, arrived after delays due to changes to the album artwork. In the midst of separating from longtime bassist Josh Woodward, who left under accusations of sexual assault and received an overall tepid response from fans, the music video for track Resentment hovers around 15 million views, while Everything We Need sits at nearly 5 million and also went #1 on Active Rock Radio, Marcos, showing that despite the loudest detractors to its quality, the album is not without its successes. 2022 standalone single Miracle, which finds the band leading into their heavier side, has over 11 million views on YouTube, Marcos, and seems to have received a much stronger critical reception from longtime fans than the entirety of the album that preceded it. So, coming off of that generally roller coaster wave of fan support, the band will be embarking on the least anticipated album tour this week with support from the story so far, 4 Year Strong, Scowl, Militar Gun, and Pain of Truth. A Day to Remember currently maintain 4.8 million monthly listeners on Spotify.
And ironically for me, it is currently my least anticipated album of 2024.
Why? What happened?
Arrives with a thud. Personally, I don't know. Maybe it's as simple as I thought Miracle was pretty solid, and I think that this as a lead single for an album is not working for me. Like aesthetically, I like the single artwork. I like that this band's back to doing fucking goofy skits to promote their shit. Again, like it's still the same old A Day to Remember in theory, but like, I don't know, the song's not cutting it for me. I just think it's flat out boring. Respectfully, in the sense that like, this is not the worst song that I've heard this week or this year.
It's worse than that, though. It's bland.
So the point I was going to make is coming off of just listening to 16 tracks of Bring Me the Horizon, a peer of A Day to Remember. Like these are bands at different levels, operating at higher levels of success than a lot of the rest of the scene. I'm comparing them to Bring Me the Horizon, Bad Omens at this point, bands who are creatively at the top of their game right now, and you just delivered to me a song that's as boring as a lot of the material on that Pierce the Veil album. If that's who you want your peers to be, that's fine. But like, I know this band is capable of so much more, I guess. I don't like, the song's not even catchy is my problem, and I don't want to just come down and beat up on it. And I know the whole point of this track is like, no one asked for your feedback, your critique, or anything like that. And whatever. At the end of the day, that's
they take
fine.
their producers out to the desert
And kill them, drop a fucking nuclear bomb on them. Actually,
yeah, there's a lot going on in that video.
The video eventually gets kind of watchable towards the end. Like
Some
there's a
good
fucking
shots.
helicopter.
Credit to the videographer and the director of that video. Whatever that creative team was, really knocked it out of the park, to be honest.
Right. Ultimately, I just walk away from this song and it's like, it's just a really bland A Day to Remember song, and that's not what I'm looking for.
It has
out
no
of this
personality. It lacks the personality of A Day to Remember that I've grown so fond of. It really feels more than anything tired, a little uninspired, significantly watered down with all of the perfections and tightness that you would come to expect from a song with a strong radio push alongside of it. It mirrors almost identically moves from recent alumni like Parkway Drive and Asking Alexandria, where it's crafted fully for the radio rock community, and any spiciness has been removed entirely in spite of this sort of like thaw spiciness that it ends with, where it has a big attitude. Fuck you. It is ultimately a picture perfect creation for everyone who needed a target to point at when defining something as coworker core. It really has the energy of a 9-hour shift where you leave work pissed at your manager and need to burn off a little steam in a way that is safe.
And I think that there is generally a place for something like that. But when I looked at a band like A Day to Remember, again, who's one of the, still essentially one of the cornerstones of this scene, I'm just looking for so much more when I know that their peers are delivering quality, like such higher quality.
There's nothing fresh and exciting. It really is a pitch perfect example of a band who is very much settled in at this point in their career, is just knocking another one out of the park for an easy win, but not in a way that like I can get behind. And it's maybe a little, I wouldn't say it's a little sadder with this band. It's once again, like it mirrors the careers of a lot of bands at this point. Like you're seeing bands who have been around for 20 years and at this stage of their career, it just does not feel like they have that same fiery passion to creatively expand upon what they've done in the past, but simply to sort of provide something that is an amalgamation of everything that you kind of remember liking about this band. And in that way, it just really feels like a tragedy watching this song, because it feels like cosplay in some capacity, where it's just like, it doesn't resonate like the real thing. And there's something just sort of like tragic about watching like a band that you've come to know as being kind of at the forefront of a movement take so many steps back and just become like the example of everything that is sort of just incredibly uninspired happening in our scene right now. I don't know how to sort of like expand upon this any further that isn't just reiterating the same couple of thoughts over and over again. It just sort of like it listening to this song sort of broke me a little bit because I don't understand how I let myself fall under the impression that this isn't going to continue to happen just because I still have bands like Bring Me the Horizon that I am sort of dependent on. I think alternatively, there are more bands who are just sort of at a stage in their career where they do not feel that push anymore. And like watching it sort of happen in real time was really like excruciating, like painful.
Well, I think the reason it was painful here is like you see that title, Feedback, you sort of know it's going to be aimed in some capacity at fans who have expressed their dislike of the You're Welcome era, whatever might have been. I don't know. I think that this band ultimately really needed to win in the fucking music department.
You'd say
and
that,
like,
but you look back.
Fine.
Yeah, but you look back on the success of those songs, and I can't tell if ultimately this band is willing to look at that and go, actually, we are doing pretty well. Theoretically, whatever advice the label is giving us is working in our favor. The same way that you look at an Asking Alexandria and you go, hey, diehard fans all said the last couple albums were nothing worth getting like excited about. And then you look at how that band is positioned and the success they've had on radio and in big rock festivals. And part of that must make them go, hey, actually what we're doing is working significantly well for us. So it's at some point it's like you've lost me, but you've gained something else that's worth trading me for.
I think the band that I look at here, like just because we've seen them do this semi-recently, is Architects, who sort of miss the point entirely, and they drop like Seeing Red. And for a lot of the core fan base, it's not like, hey, listen, we just want you to sort of be like, not you again, but just like push yourselves creatively a little bit more, which that band takes as an insult. So they drop like a Seeing Red aimed at the fans. This band does that with Feedback. And it's like,
I feel like they did it with Miracle, and then Feedback, I think, is a step back to exactly what they were doing before.
Sure. So yeah, I don't know. Ultimately, not impressed at all with Feedback. Like it is not awful. It's fine.
But the problem is that fine, is wildly disappointing when it comes to a band like A Day to Remember, because they're capable of so much more than fine. 4 Year Strong have dropped new song Uncooked. New album Analysis Paralysis will release August 9th via Pure Noise Records. It's the follow-up to 2020's Brain Pain and will feature previous singles Daddy of Mine and Dead End Friend, which has exceeded 1 million streams on Spotify. The album was produced by Will Putney. Regarding the new album, per the press release, it will expand upon their sound in exciting ways. The band will be supporting A Day to Remember on the aforementioned least anticipated album tour starting this week. 4 Year Strong currently stand at over 400,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. Marks, what are you feeling about the glitzy of it all in this music video?
You say glitzy?
Yeah, that's right. Glizzy? What did I say?
You said glitzy.
Yeah, I put a little twist on it.
Glitz and glamour.
I put a little twist on it. That's how I pronounce it. I have an accent.
Couple of things here. 4 Year Strong, quietly very healthy, at least in the streaming side of things.
Yeah, they've got a respectable number. You know, you compare them to their arch nemesis and now touring compatriots, A Day to Remember.
Well, I don't know.
It feels a little
after this new song, maybe second.
You think it'll flip?
Suck A Day to Remember.
Wow, you just want to like see if we can like ignite this feud once again.
Let's get Amir in on this beef
right
too.
Before the tour starts. Yeah. If you throw Amir on this least anticipated album tour, it would be the funniest fucking like lineup I've ever seen in my life.
Bro. Frankie Palmieri drop kicks the Story So Far vocalist off stage.
You're just like making dreams come true.
He would have 9 different beefs on that tour.
Oh, and you'd love every one of them.
Yeah.
You just fucking soak in them.
I am excited for Analysis Paralysis when it releases on August 9th. I will be listening to it.
What did I mean by that? Soak in it.
You're talking on some Mormon shit.
Yeah. Like, what the fuck am I on today, dog? I'm so off my shit. It's so bad, bro.
You saw the vocalist of 4 Years Strong and your brain just jumped to Mormonism?
Bro, give me a glitzy.
Get a glizzy?
Get my fucking energy up, bro.
What's your ideal glizzy, Sam? Walk me through it.
It's I think it's whatever fucking happens in this video. Like, they do chili, but then they throw a little mustard on that bitch, and I'm like, hey, that'd be looking all right. That'd be looking pretty good.
We went to a Chicago glizzy fucking like brick and mortar glizzy place.
You feel like you just activated a sleeper agent. Chicago,
they had
glizzy,
all sorts of shit.
Sleeper. Yeah.
And I remember that was probably like the best glizzy I had in my life.
Yeah, it was incredible. I believe it was Chicago style, as a matter of fact, which is why it was so good.
This video is filmed at Coney Island, which is home of the glizzy.
Which is not in
my understanding.
Chicago, yeah.
That's in New Jersey, York.
Yeah, in or around, yeah, the general New Jersey, New York, broader.
One of the beaches.
Yeah, just in the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah, touching on generally like the state line.
Again, I'm excited for Analysis Paralysis.
Dirty Little Riff really kicks this one off in a way that like gets me excited about this band in a minute. For like the first time in a minute.
Think it's a good video while also being extremely put off by it.
Oh, you just don't like seeing somebody like down a bunch of glitzies?
Good performances from the band. I don't like seeing a man like covered in buns, like clearly an analysis paralysized.
Yeah. No, 100%. I love what the band does in this video where they just sort of like stare blankly into space in a way that's like really compelling, like almost like they're hypnotized.
Paralyzed even.
Yeah, that's fair. And they also have like at least a couple of them have the blue eyes from the Dune Spice, the Glitzy Spice.
Do they?
Yeah.
I didn't notice that.
Strong, piercing, blue eyes. Marcus,
most excited I've been about 4 Years Strong
100%.
in a long
Even
time.
the last couple singles were really good. Like I think, you know, it took me probably 15 years, but I think I've finally come around on 4 Years Strong being a fairly good band from my hometown.
It was bound to happen.
Yeah, sooner or later. They won me over. Waterparks have premiered new track, Soul Sucker. New album, Intellectual Property 2, Lost in the Property, the direct sequel to 2023's Intellectual Property, will release through Fueled by Ramen on a yet-to-be-announced future date. The album will feature previous single, Sneaking Out of Heaven, which, interestingly enough, was also tagged to the end of Intellectual Property on Spotify. And the album will also feature a collaboration with Zeph on track FAI. Austin Knight, speaking on the new track, he did it in all capitals, so I'll yell it. The Soul Sucker demo was started in 2021 when Intellectual Property was only half done. I'd literally been in the studio doing self-sabotage the day before with the Tricolor Greatest Hits hair.
If you weren't already going to lose your voice after this episode, you will now. Continue.
Lyrics were fully recorded, then rewritten like 4 times because it needed to be perfect. You can hear it if you think about it, but Soul Sucker was recorded with the same $40 toy guitar, Funeral Grey, and Brainwashed were both tracked on. Waterparks will be playing the Lollapalooza after show on August 3rd. The band currently set at 1.5 million monthly listeners on Spotify.
I'm sorry, are Waterparks not allowed to play the Lollapalooza as it's currently happening show?
Lollapalooza said, you've got to earn it.
I think they have.
I feel like they've played it in the past, yeah. Maybe the after show is better. Maybe that's where the cooler bands play.
I guess maybe.
The cool bands play the after show.
Fashionably late to the Palooza, so you get to play the after show. Yeah, that makes sense.
Sure, yeah, that's what we'll say.
That's how you're cool.
Waterparks might be, for me, one of the most... one of the greatest guarantees in the scene right now. Like, hey, if nobody got me, Waterparks got me.
I'm gonna be real. There is a disappointing aspect of this.
What? And what is it? What?
Lost in the Property.
I love it.
I think that we could have gone all lowercase on every letter except in Lost. OST.
OST in the Property.
Intellectual property OST. And we're cooking with grease.
Extremely flammable,
oil.
the most flammable gasoline.
Yeah. I need Austin to really expand on this $40 toy guitar. Because like we've written 3 hits off that bitch.
$1,500 Machine Gun Kelly guitar, $40 Austin Knight toy guitar. It's the coughing baby nuclear bomb of this scene. Why is this band such a fucking creative ocean? The depths of which they can reach from song to song, the way they can continue to expand on their sound in new and exciting ways, the way it continuously feels fresh and new. I just feel like there's such a wealth of capturing my interest in ways that so many other bands struggle to do. But when Waterparks say we have a new song coming out, it's like, this is exciting, and I can depend on it being exciting, and I get so incredibly hyped for it. And then it's not only ever the song, it's the fucking weird music videos that they put together. It's just like, I want to crack open Austin Knight's fucking skull and just see all the little Inside Out characters in there running around, just like just fucking like just museum of just like this Pixar warehouse of like brilliance.
I don't know how I could possibly follow that up with any additional thoughts.
I just feel floored. Like, I'm constantly just floored by this band.
I'm right there with you.
There was a point in time where I thought Waterparks, I was like, oh, just this goofy pop punk band. And then, like, I turn around and it's like, no, actually, literally some of the most brilliant creatives in the alternative music scene.
Right. Flat out geniuses.
Like, I will continuously apologize for not respecting their game early and often.
Fair enough.
Really cool music video. Austin and I was also like commenting on that a while back as well. Austin and I, the vocalist for Waterparks, obviously, about how there are like some trees in the background which are real, and then some that are like animated, and it creates this like really neat effect.
There was like a claymation-y effect at times.
Yeah, it's almost like if having things like maybe move at different frames or something gives it like this sort of like interesting feeling, vibe, so on and so forth. Speaking of vibes and interesting feelings, Marcus, Balance and Composure have released new single Cross to Bear. New album, With You in Spirit, is out October 4th via Memory Music. It'll mark the band's first full-length album in 8 years, following 2016's Light We Made, though the band did drop a surprise 2-song EP in 2023. The band also released additional single Sorrow Machine later that same day. Vocalist guitarist John Simmons shared the following per Pitchfork in regards to the new album. I began to feel like a kid again. We were writing these songs for the pure reason of having an outlet and getting together with your friends, no pressure. We were longing for it, and we found it as soon as we got together. We didn't want that train to stop. Marcos, this band kind of went on a hiatus for a few years and then came back in 2023 with that EP. So that explains a little bit while this felt fresh to them, like getting the band back together. The album was written and recorded with producer Will Yip, known for his work with Movement, Circus Survive, and Panic at the Disco, among many more. The band will be heading out on the With You in Spirit tour this October with support from Kevin Devine and the Goddamn Band and Millie. Balance and Composure currently stand at nearly 185,000 monthly listeners on Spotify.
A lot of excitement around those 2 songs, that EP that dropped.
I think that was actually the first time that we talked about Balance and Composure, was when that EP dropped. Like the first time ever on the show, period. Is when that EP dropped last year, yeah.
I remember liking those.
I got caught up in the hype of them returning.
Yeah, I remember liking those not nearly as much as I'm clinging on to this song. This is fucking great. And I know that that's sort of like That's always been the Balance and Composure thing, right? Is that is a great band, but I'm really starting
now
to see
we're
it for
seeing
myself.
it. Yes, precisely.
So I haven't heard the other track. I think this one is really great. It's got a neat little video which incorporates like camtrails, which are like, you know, when you put up a fucking Nest camera in the wilderness and it captures like in black and white like deers that walk by, but this band sort of like
they caught Balance and Composure walking by
as like a performance shot, right? So your vocalist is like singing into that. It's just very neat.
Everything about it is very mesmerizing, like the vocal delivery, the sound that they're sort of going for, the video that they've crafted around it. There's a shot in that video as well where it's like light protruding just out of like the vocalist's mouth in a way that's like really captivating. It's just whoever came up with this video, you know, whether the band, the creatives they worked with, once again, really knocked it out of the park. Just really sort of creative like on a budget. Just really impressed with what they came together and really liking this band sound and glad that, you know, my cross to bear is that it took me this long to get into Balance and Composure, but I'm glad that I'm finally here.
Top one amendment, the right to bear crosses.
Is that actually the...
yeah.
Yeah, is that it? I wasn't sure. Marco's Nightlife surprise with new single, Strange Love.
Feels like we're going back in time. Just call it strange love.
This new track follows up 2023 single Face to Face and 2022 EP Fallback. It was released alongside another new single as well titled I/O. The band are currently on tour supporting Outline and Color alongside Fox Cult. Nightlife have amassed just over 50,000 monthly listeners on Spotify since their inception just a few short years ago.
And quickly climbing, right? Nightlife.
Growing fast.
Growing at a decent rate.
Exploding onto the scene.
And I can see tracks like Strangelove and I/O helping contribute.
Why is that? Why do you feel that way?
Of Nightlife, because this band is just...
They got the scene cornered on this
everything
sound. Cornered.
Data Remember is not. And what I mean by that is...
new, exciting.
Right, fresh, creative, pushing boundaries, all these different things that ultimately...
trend setting,
add up to a mesmerizing song after song after song. Every step of the way, Nightlife has thrown a curveball at us.
They were talking earlier.
And they've not yet missed.
The patrons were saying earlier, is moshing out, is ass shaking in. It is if you're a Nightlife fan, I can tell you that right now. This is the type of band that you can't help but move to.
Yes.
And I really like what they do with the simplicity of this video. You know, it's just sort of like a couple locations. It's band kind of like
on site in Maryland.
On site in Maryland. Baltimore. Hard posing, walking up and down alleyways. Like all of it just really sort of works.
Good performing on a roof of like a tall building shot.
Strong roof performance. They also introduced like a second vocalist in like some capacity.
Right.
Like suddenly we got two singers in this band.
Existing member of the band suddenly taking on some additional vocal duties. And it's essentially like I don't know what you would do, like pre-chorus. It leads into the chorus. It's like a mesmerizing little 2 lines of delivery. I think it's really great.
And it opens that way, which sort of like it catches me off guard. And it says to me like, hey, Nightlife is a band. It's like, you don't have them figured out whatsoever this early on in their career. Like the tricks up their sleeves are endless.
The Breakdown.
All right, let's review this album.
Concrete Jungle, the OST by Bad Omens. This, of course, is the Richmond, Virginia outfit's latest offering, released the 31st of May via Sumerian Records. The OST, as I will be referring to it moving forward,
shorthand, yeah,
is the much anticipated deluxe edition of the Death of Peace of Mind LP, the band's 3rd studio album. It released February 25th of 2022. It's been a couple of years. For anyone living under a rock, here's a quick refresher on that album. It was produced by the band, mixing and mastering done by Zach Cervini. It spawned 3 radio singles, Like a Villain, Just Pretend, The Death of Peace of Mind, 2 of which went gold. One, July of last year, that was Just Pretend. The other one, The Death of Peace of Mind, which hit radio in 2023, was RIAA Gold Certified January 11th of this year. And then Just Pretend actually went platinum in April of this year. That's in excess of 1 million digital sales and streams.
Insane.
We don't talk about that a lot on this show because it rarely happens to bands in this scene.
Yeah, that's 100% correct.
On February 26th, 2023, the band released a cappella versions to commemorate the album's first anniversary. So, in total, to summarize, it ended up being pretty important, both a critical darling and a commercial success, and it was also our album of the year in 2022.
Possibly the highest honor it's received to date.
Absolutely. The way I wanted to tackle the OST was in 3 parts, Sam. In this instance, that would mean backwards, because I want to start from the end.
Interesting.
To the middle, and then we will end with the beginning.
Okay.
I figured that we would start with the live cuts, because it is the most familiar the material on here possibly gets. Songs we've been listening to since 22, and have actually caught live a few times, so we're fairly well versed. I also wanted to, with all that in mind, shout out Matt Dirks, I believe is how you say his last name there, who's essentially the 5th or 6th man of Bad Omens, who not only helped track and engineer much of the material on this release as a whole, but most relevant to the topic at hand, mixed these live tracks. We've got an assortment. So these are tracks 19 through 26. It's everything off of The Death of Peace of Mind, Artificial Suicide, Like a Villain, The Gray, What Do You Want From Me, Nowhere to Go, Van, The Death of Peace of Mind, Just Pretend. So not everything off of that original release. You have Van. But a good assortment of tracks from the band's live set, all recorded in 2024. One of them, at the very least, Nowhere to Go, recorded in Prague, so overseas, over in Europe. I reached out to Matt. He said a couple of them were released in Prague. He couldn't recall, or recorded in Prague. Yeah, couldn't recall all of them. But that it wasn't all just from one night. This is from across that European tour. One thing I did want to note when I did cross-reference that Prague date, trying to figure out on my own if it was all from the same show, all of the songs in order on this release are how the band performs them live, with the exception of tracks in the middle that are cut.
Okay. So they've maintained the sanctity of the set. It was delivered to us as God originally intended it to be heard.
Right. It felt deliberate, and I appreciate that very small detail.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you want to tackle these, Sam. I wanted to get these out of the way, so to speak, again, because they are familiar tracks.
They are the ones that require like the least critical analysis.
Right. I guess the reason I did want to spend some time talking about this again, and credit to Matt, the live aspect of this band is sort of integral to their image, in a sense, their stature within the scene.
You can say that about a lot of bands, though. Why Bad Omens specifically?
Honestly, it's because Matt takes so much pride in being essentially the sound guy, the front of house for this band.
And maybe it's because he's maybe a little more vocal and familiar than other sound guys in the capacity that you mentioned. He's their 6th man earlier on.
Yep. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of talk about these. For me, the biggest highlight of this bunch was Nowhere to Go, which came as a surprise. And at the end of the day, when I heard all of these tracks, stood out to me as potentially one of maybe the more underrated live tracks this band has. It's just a good one.
it's like the one that you maybe can't look at this track listing and say exactly that you would expect to be on the set list.
Right. Then there are others, of course, that you would expect. Van is a quick favorite with audiences by the looks of it. You get goosebumps when you start hearing people sing along to Violence Against Nature at the top of that track alongside Poppy in this live version. I get goosebumps, Sam. So like, I don't know, instantly for me, that song earned its placement.
There's also a fascinating aspect to it as well, that there feels like there's a necessity to capture it in this capacity, because the idea that Poppy is going to find themselves on every Bad Omens store conveniently for the remainder of time so that this song can to be on the set list is not realistic. So the idea that we have capsuled it on this album in particular allows you to sort of be able to like continuously revisit it. In some capacity, you have to think that will apply to a lot of the other songs on this OST as well, but we'll get into that a little later. The idea that like they may only necessarily find themselves being performed live under particular circumstances, when Bad Omens tends to cross path with these bands in the future. Though obviously everything about Van feels a little more premeditated, where we got this song and then we got that tour and then we got those live performances. You have to feel as if this was significantly more well considered for all of those things to happen, and thus for us to end up in the position we are now where we have this live recording on this album. I think for me, a favorite on here in particular is Like a Villain. I just think that I rarely even think of that as a single. I honestly, when you mentioned the 3 songs that were radio singles, I thought to myself, you forgot Artificial Suicide and instead included Like a Villain. Because for me, those are the songs that I think immediately of, even though Like a Villain and The Gray were released prior to the album actually coming out as go-ahead singles, I still don't necessarily consider them in that capacity because they didn't quite feel as if they broke through in a major way in the same way that those other tracks did.
Well, that's the funny aspect of this, though, is when that song dropped, you felt like that would be the runaway hit off this album.
Absolutely. And in some ways, I still hear it and feel as if it still feels understated or underappreciated, right? And I don't want to be that guy. I fully appreciate it.
It
you
is
know what I
in
mean?
the top 3 on Spotify.
Also fair, right? Like fair, but it's almost like we were talking about this with Bring Me the Horizon last week, where it's like, oh, Dark Side, 50 million streams, most popular song off of Next Gen. And I'm like, no, that's not. No, people talk about Amen. They talk about Kool-Aid. You know, they even talk about maybe Lost a little bit more than Dark Side. But yeah, I guess that song's obviously popular. Like, why wouldn't it be?
Right. Just Pretend obviously closes out this album, that live version. And you also get like an acoustic bit at the end that I can't quite tell if it's actually live or not.
No, I don't know that I would say it is live, because do you feel like I feel like the crowd would come through much stronger.
Exactly.
If an acoustic song like that is being performed live, especially with the kind of crowds that Bad Omens draws in. I guess for me, it feels maybe closer to something like a live performance, but not actually performed during their live set.
It definitely has like a rawness to it that all of the tracks on here do. And I mean that like very respectfully. I love like when you listen to Nowhere to Go, Noah telling the crowd to get active in that pit. Like I know you guys aren't not opening a circle pit to this next song for me. Like hearing that crowd interaction, I think adds a ton. And how well the crowd comes in on over like the microphone, I guess, I think adds, I don't know, like again, the live performance for Bad Omens feels integral. And again, I don't know how much of that is because suddenly that is the band you need to see on every festival. You need to go to their sold out tour and watch them perform. not to say it's manufactured, but I do love that these songs exist on here because also it gives you a taste of what you might be missing out on.
Sure, though, you know, we start from this angle at the very end of the album because I think that, speaking for myself at least, I was maybe least excited to hear these live tracks. I always feel like it's so difficult to communicate the energy and the excitement you have listening to these songs live when you include them in an album. I think it's neat, but it wasn't the driving force, the thing that really propelled my excitement going into this record. So I like the choice to start with these first because I really don't have deep critical thoughts about them. I don't have criticisms overall of any of these. They all sound good to me. Bad Omens sounds like a good live band. This sound is captured fairly well, but I don't know that I feel like I have any strong opinion on them outside of the specific tale to Just Pretend, which feels like it's meant to convey something more that I think maybe speaks to the overall theme that is meant to be conveyed across the Death of Peace of Mind and now this OST, but I want to save that for later in this discussion.
Yeah. And I fully agree. Not a whole lot to chew on here, but I definitely wanted to discuss this because at the very least,
it's there. We should discuss it because it's there.
It's there and it's good, and it's more than you can say for some live performances that are tacked on to other deluxe whatever they might be considered. Those come recommended.
Marcus, let's move on to Patches, Remixes, and More, which encompasses tracks 11 to 18. We have file name Find Peace, followed by Artificial Suicide Unzip featuring 1,000 Below, The Gray Unzip featuring 1,000 Below, The Death of Peace of Mind, We Are Fury Patch, The Death of Peace of Mind, So Wiley Patch, Bad Decisions, Lo-Fi featuring Dahlia, Just Pretend, Credits featuring Let's Eat Grandma in Chief, and finally, another file name, Clear Mind. Marcos, let's start with the bookends here. Find Peace and Clear Mind. Somebody actually tagged me in a post on Twitter, one of our followers, Heather, where somebody had like slowed down. I think it's the intro and then these two file names as well. And the idea that what they truly encompass is white noise that Noah is trying to speak through, to communicate through, for us to hear him through this white noise. And ultimately what the overall like theme of the Death of Peace of Mind and now the OST, as best I understand it, which is I think a little bit also like this idea that Noah's trying to speak to listeners but also speak to themselves through the white noise. I think that I've been trying to formulate in my mind the best way to get this point across and explain what I think is happening here. And ultimately there is this sort of like discussion, this idea that's happening between like the actual self and the mind, and how they're having this like conversation back and forth, and that the self is trying to break through the walls that the mind is putting up. And this idea that like the walls that they put up are all of this self-doubt or self-loathing or the mental barriers that would like prevent you from being the sort of true version of yourself, of like whether it's preventing you from being happy, preventing you from accomplishing your art, preventing you from feeling at home, and like this sort of varying levels that you sort of find yourself traversing through and trying to get back to yourself and trying to get like your voice out there. And like, I understand that as I'm trying to decipher this live on air, that maybe I'm not entirely getting the point across, but I think that later on when we talk about some of the opening tracks on this song, you very much feel this capacity of an individual speaking to themselves and then themselves speaking back, and this sort of constant battle between individuals and just wanting to be heard. and to break through these walls that have been put up. And then in some capacity, this art that you've created is communicating and getting that point across. And like, I so desperately want to come up with a more cohesive way to sort of like speak to these jumbled thoughts that I have, but there is a energy, there is a conceptual nature to this. There is a overall theme that I think is being communicated that really speaks to someone who feels trapped inside of themselves and is trying to break through. And we're sort of witnessing that conversation. And I think it really culminates in the end of this record. And it finds itself like rearing its head in instances like these files, which in that post that was shared with us, if you slow them down, as I mentioned earlier, it's really someone trying to just break through and be heard, but constantly feeling trapped inside themselves, I think, in some way. I really want, again, so desperately to sort of like be able to like cohesively express what I think is being said here, but there are so many layers, and I just began to feel as if I was breaking them apart in a way that I could piece them together. And like,
before you had to put this down and come discuss the
right,
album.
it really expressed this narrative in the way that I feel like I had interpreted it, and I couldn't quite get there. But this album, and you know, the one that it's based off of, I feel like I think is ultimately the art that's like created to break through this noise and be heard. And that noise can be a million different things. And like, there's just so much there to chew on. And I can't quite fully grasp it all.
You feel close to cracking the case.
Yeah. Or understanding what is being communicated to me, because I think so clearly something is being communicated to me. And I think I'm interpreting it as the artist wants me to interpret it, or I'm putting all of my own perceptions upon it as best I can and interpreting it as I think, as I want to hear this story like come across throughout the OST and the album that precedes it.
So safe to say you're a big fan of the file names. That collection.
Yeah, I understand that I sort of like broke off maybe a small thought and expanded it like immensely across like the entirety of this album. But like, yes, because I think there is...
I mean, you're getting into the discussion we ultimately do want to get into.
Right. So like, just to pause real quick, it's like I say maybe the live versions of these tracks are maybe the least necessary or don't necessitate the strongest critical analysis, but I do think they are very necessary maybe in the capacity of this record, because I think they are versions of one's true self. And all of this sort of circles back to this idea of just pretending, and cuts into a track we'll talk about later on, which is Even, which is like facing yourself and like ways that you're trying to overcome these things. It's just like, I think the narrative's kind of sprawling, and that's why I struggle so much to fully like be able to grasp it all.
One thing that I wanted to touch on in the live cuts, that segment that we didn't, was the fact that with Bad Omens, I know that the perception of that band live has been like, oh, well, it's not all live. It's, you know, these vocals are tracked and we're lip syncing, whatever. And I remember like when Bad Omens were first touring off of this album, Noah would intentionally like move the mic away from their mouth to show like the dips in you know, picking up his voice, to show you that like, no, this is actually him singing right now. So as far as like breaking through to the audience and things like that, I guess the reason I bring that up is maybe not entirely related to what you're talking about, but in the sense of like including that to show you that like there is effort being put in on that end as well. And we're including that to sort of prove like it's the whole package in a sense. I don't ultimately know where I'm going with that. But let's get into some of these patches and remixes, and we'll kind of circle our way back into some of what you were touching on there as far as like ultimately what the narrative is behind the OST. We start officially with the two tracks from Thousand Below, which are Artificial Suicide Unzipped and The Gray Unzipped. Of these two, for real quick though, for those unfamiliar with Thousand Below, a band that we have covered at length on this show, a favorite of ours. They're signed to Pale Chord Records right now. They released, what the fuck was the name of that album 2 years ago?
Gone in Your Wake?
Gone in Your Wake. Is it that?
That doesn't sound right. Hell
Finds You Everywhere. Gone in Your Wake was the one before it. We've covered that band for a while. They're based out of California. The reason I sort of give some detail there is there's a lot of artists on here, We Are Fury, So Wiley, that we've barely touched on the show, if at all.
I will provide more context.
That we will provide context for, yeah. Of these two from Thousand Below, Artificial Suicide and The Gray, I think that they leave their mark on The Gray in a big way that I really did appreciate, and it turns out that is my favorite of those two tracks as far as what
I align completely. I'm 100% with you. I think it's the stronger of the two tracks as well. Ultimately, it feels like kind of what Thousand Below does as an approach here is sort of like Nightcoreifies.
Yeah, and I think they do
both
a great
of these
job
tracks,
at it.
and The Gray seems much better suited to it than Artificial Suicide does.
I think they throw a lot of texture on top of The Gray as well, and it gives that song a different life that I really do truly end up appreciating. We move on to The Death of Peace of Mind, the We Are Fury patch. Who are We Are Fury?
Marcus, Canadian DJ and music production duo consisting of Joaquim Speidel and Stuart Brooks. The duo often split workloads equally to use their strengths. Speidel writes and produces while Brooks focuses on sound design and song arrangement. The two listed heavy metal and rock music bands alongside video game music, and Speidel's roots of North American and Latin music as influence for their music production style. I thought this was a pretty flavorful track that had a lot of bounce to it and really made The Death of Peace of Mind a slightly more poppy's not the word for it, but it made it pop a little more.
It's got a its pop sensibility doubles with the We Are Fury touch in a way that it makes that patch for me a big standout on this segment of the album. I walked away really being enamored with this track and what We Are Fury added to it, and I don't know. I expect to throw this on like a playlist or two. I really enjoyed this patch.
Yeah, I ultimately felt similarly about So Wiley when they dropped the Death of Peace of Mind patch earlier alongside the Drain single. So Wiley,
who are So Wiley?
New York-based music producer, composer, and artist that debuted in 2022. Her music flirts between dark electronic and ethereal alt pop, meshing digital sonic creations with warm acoustic ones. Additionally, her music has been featured on Apple TV's The Morning Show and is seen alongside Jennifer Aniston and John Hamm, and in Netflix's Too Hot to Handle and High Heat. As a sound designer, she has both created specified realistic immersive scenes using SFX and Foley, and more broadly developed overall sonic identities for new series.
Yeah, So Wiley seems to have come out of nowhere and quickly left a mark on, I guess, fucking music in general. And now in this scene with this patch for Bad Omens. But I loved a lot of So Wiley's background. Having like a background in sound design and immersion, SFX, things like that, easily sort of proves to me why So Wiley became someone this band realized they had to work with on this OST.
Yeah, credit to not just these artists and what they do with these songs, but Bad Omens for the inspiring choices that they selected to sort of recreate these tracks. I feel like it's hard to take something like The Death of Peace of Mind, which so many people are like overly familiar with and adore, and try to make it feel fresh and interesting in different ways. And I think these artists really succeeded in doing that.
Some real inspired picks, and I think one of the biggest ones is up next with Bad Decisions, Lo-Fi featuring Dahlia. Sam, who is Dahlia?
Dahlia, Kaori is a singer, also designer, illustrator, and therapist. Dahlia acts as a solo project for Kaori, and the project has been active since 1998. Kaori develops pop music that incorporates elements such as bossa nova, French pop, jazz, and movie music.
And quotations there at the end. But yeah, that to me is an inspired choice, because I could not imagine any other band in this scene going and reaching out to Dahlia, asking them to work with them or on this track. That to me is like a real that has to be like the most Noah decision on this album for me. That's clearly someone that I think Noah has probably admired for many years.
I think Dahlia was able to pull from Bad Decisions a much stronger emotional resonance for me personally than the song originally had. And for that reason, I also agree that I think this is my favorite of the bunch that we're discussing right now.
I love that. I don't know if it's my favorite on here, but definitely a standout. Just Pretend credits featuring Let's Eat Grandma and Chief ends up being my favorite of this bunch.
Interesting. So Let's Eat Grandma are a British experimental pop duo formed in 2013 by Russell Walton and Jenny Hollingworth. Let's Eat Grandma described their music as experimental sludge pop. Russell Walton also produced a song, I Really Want to Stay at Your House, for the video game Cyberpunk 2077, which would go on to feature prominently in the 2022 anime Cyberpunk Edge Runners. Chief is a band from LA, which also houses singer and producer Michael Taylor, who is a frequent Bad Omens collaborator with co-writes on Who Are You off the original album and a few of the deluxe like Van and Drain.
Yeah. This one for me is the biggest standout by far. I think the way that Let's Eat Grandma and Chief transform this song, and I mean, the fact that like every song on here is essentially, it's still Bad Omens, but like Just Pretend is very similar to the first half of this album that we haven't gotten to yet, in that like we get rid of the vocal stems from Noah Sebastian pretty much, and you replace them with, I guess it's Let's Eat Grandma, the vocalists in that act, and it just absolutely transforms that song for me. That last bit, the wait till morning, way down on me, like that bit just hits such a emotional chord with this reinvented version. And this entire song, I don't know, it's just an absolute standout for me.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I kind of like showed my hand a little earlier there. Bad Decisions is my preferred, but I also like Just Pretend really well. Once again, incredibly inspired choices in terms of collaboration. And Just Pretend, I think, is a song that they did, like I don't know that I'd say they elevated it, but they did sort of like...
They made a song that needed to be refreshed just because of the commercial success
they put it almost like into a different perspective for me slightly, right? Yeah. And like they kept it sort of like it doesn't feel dramatically different, but it does, like it has like a new, like a little bit of a new shimmer with this version.
Well, it's a song I've heard a lot, and I think that it introduces like a fun new twist to it that for me, like, it doesn't replace the original, but it might, because I do truly like it that much. It's a really great song. I'm really happy with, again, the band's decision to include all of these fresh faces to a lot of the people in our scene, even though I recognize people like Let's Eat Grandma are extremely popular in their own right. I think they're, flirting with 2 million monthly on Spotify, even that artist.
That's fair. Marcus, and finally, let's talk about the fresh cuts. New songs, some featuring massive all-star appearances from the likes of Health, Orgasm UK, Poppy Era, and more. And this also starts with a file name, Beat Death, which once again ties into that sort of earlier narrative, sort of this idea that Noah's sort of trying to quite literally break through the white noise, which is something that we reference multiple times throughout this record.
Well, I do like to taking those 3 important words from the album title and expanding on them, right? You're not just, it's not the death of peace of mind, it's beating death, it's finding peace. I forgot what the other one was.
It's this very
Clearing
internal
minds.
struggle. Marcus, the other tracks that we're going to talk about is Van featuring Poppy, The Drain featuring Health and Swarm, Terms and Conditions featuring Bob Villain, Hedonist Recharge featuring Wargasm UK, followed by Even, Loading Screen, Anything More Than Human featuring Era, Digital Footprint, and Nervous System featuring Iris.exe.
Which are the first 10 tracks off of this OST.
Van, maybe the one that we're all most familiar with. It was technically the go-ahead single from the OST, though we didn't know it at the time. Obviously, we discussed the live version a little earlier on, Marcos. Van, I feel like in my mind, has taken on a bit of a new life when I start to sort of tie it into all of the sort of conceptual thing that I talked about earlier. I think this idea of violence against nature is this idea that like that nature is your mind and sort of like the chemicals it produces and this battle against the mind itself. And I still think it's one of my absolute favorite Bad Omens songs since the beginning of their discography, not just talking about the last album and this as well. And I think Poppy is undoubtedly one of the best kept secret isn't the way to put it, because Poppy is quite popular in her own right, but I feel like she's being expanded into newer audiences that may not have had or engaged with her in the past and are maybe also realizing, as we did in listening to especially that last Poppy album, which I thought was phenomenal, the talent that she is overall.
Yeah. And it's here where you're sort of illuminated into why this band called this an OST. Original soundtrack. You look at an original soundtrack for a motion picture, for a video game, and the pattern you see is that it's maybe one artist that shows up multiple times. In this instance, that's Bad Omens. And then in other instances, you have these one-offs. You have Poppy with their own song, Bob Villain with their own song, Wargasm with their own song. So in sort of giving the spotlight to all of these different artists, Bad Omens sort of intentionally sort of finds a way to actually make Concrete Jungle an OST in more than just name alone, but also in like approach.
Right. This idea that it's scoring something, that it's providing the music to a story of some capacity. Again, I'm still trying to piece it all together.
That not only Bad Omens can tell, but they need help in telling that story, right?
Right.
So yeah,
they've gathered a party,
and I end up being enamored with that decision. You spoke highly, of course, of Van. I agree with everything you have to say about that song. The Drain, the second single, even though, again, we didn't know it at the time, I think, right? I don't think it was announced alongside. It might have been, maybe.
Yeah, The Drain was, when they released The Drain in the So Wiley patch, that was in announcing the new album.
Got it. So that one features Health and Swarm. For me, I don't know. I go sort of back and forth on what my favorite is between those two tracks as your singles, not counting the Wiley patch.
But you can fully comprehend why they were singles. They're two of Bad Omen's strongest tracks to date.
100%. And I think they keep things fucking moving at a wonderful pace with Terms and Conditions featuring Bob Villain. Do you know Bob Villain? I know you know Bob Villain, but do you know that that's a duo?
I did not know. No, Bob Villain for me, I assumed was an individual.
So English rap rock duo based in London. Elements of like grime, punk rock, hip hop. Formed in 2017 by singer-guitarist Bobby Villain, Bobby with a Y, and drummer Bobby Villain, Bobby with an IE.
Fun.
Stage names to protect their privacy, and they call themselves the Bobs. I just thought that was wonderful when I was getting like sort of a refresher on
one of the quirkier lore stories we've had about an artist. Sure.
Further to drive that quirk even further, Sam, Bob Dylan not cited as a musical influence by either member.
Fascinating.
Fucking love to see it.
Fascinating.
That's a big standout track for me here. A lot of cool lyrics, good energy overall in the song, even though like a lot of it is definitely post-apocalyptic, cyberpunky hellscape stuff. There's a great line
I think there's a
in here.
literalness to it, though, isn't there? Like this idea that like this constant barrage on social media of like we are being fed sort of all of the news all at once, and this idea that is incredibly overwhelming, and like you have to be able to like break through, like it has to be able to break through, and you have to be able to break through it all at once, right?
It's got
like
some amazing
some capacity
imagery.
of it feels more on the nose than a lot of the other tracks on here.
Yeah, it's got some amazing imagery. There's a line on there talking about adding more thoughts and prayers to the landfill of thoughts and prayers. So like stuff like that's very striking.
Yeah,
I think
exactly. It's an incredible brushstroke on a painting.
Bob Dylan are such a great vessel to deliver those thoughts and that message. I think that they just have like a really brilliant energy about them. And I'm not just saying brilliant because they're British. Just, I like that word. So that ends up being a song I really enjoyed. Hedonist Recharged it was definitely, when that track listing was announced, probably the song I was most curious of, because I feel like I've never seen a band revive a song that's 8 years old.
I don't know that that's necessarily true. I would argue we see that happen early and often in many different capacities. This maybe being slightly more interesting because overall this is sort of presented
It's rare.
as...
It's rare.
It's right, but this is ultimately sort of presented as like a build upon just the last album. So the idea that we go back a little further than that and pull in a track from their debut is again, it's a fascinating choice.
Concrete junglifying something off the debut is insane to me. But that's what I love about Bad Omens is you would never have guessed that this track listing would have looked like any. I mean, we talked about the idea of a deluxe from this band.
It feels like it opens up a door of possibility, right?
Yeah.
I will say ultimately I walked away from this track with it being maybe my least favorite of the bunch here.
This one featuring Wargasm UK.
Yes.
I'm not far off, and it's not because I don't like Wargasm UK.
Wargasm UK I'm actually quite fond of,
Yeah.
yes.
I
just don't think this works as well as I would have hoped it would.
Yeah, it didn't stick with me the way I was hoping it would either. We move on to Even, which is the first of the bunch that do not feature anyone. It's just Bad Omens alone. And it's funny because we don't really get that on this deluxe, right?
No, it's rare, right?
It's
We're
very
talking about
rare.
26 tracks and it happens like twice.
I mean, it's the only time it happens on this album.
Singularly, if we're just talking vocals, but I guess
Yeah.
technically, loading screen and digital footprint do not include features.
Right. How do you feel about Even?
I adore it.
It's
Honestly,
fucking good.
because there's something about it that I think it's truly the linchpin in the sort of full conceptual narrative that we have here. And if like you can crack that song, I think you can really put together like the basis of the story being told here. But I think it's the most blunt in trying to get the point across of this argument between like one's like mind and like person. Just with its opening lines of like seeing yourself in the mirror and punching it and trying to like get away from the self. And I feel like that's a thing that we kind of like revisit again in the future with like this idea where if I kill myself, can I escape this all? I think that track in particular, like it can anchor the whole argument for what I think the basis of this record is, if I can just fully wrap my mind around the point it's trying to get across. And I think that's also maybe why it necessitates just Bad Omens being singularly on the song, because it's their story to tell ultimately.
Right. Yeah, I love that. We move on to Loading Screen.
Loading Screen feels like this is a flat out instrumental track, but it's a quite beautiful one. And I think that it ties into Even in some capacity, of which there's this idea, I think, of this inner self trying to break out again through the white noise. And I think it's breaking out and expressing themselves through the art. And Loading Screen is like one of the most like artistically beautiful tracks on the song. I think personally, I think that it's like, it's the sunshine breaking through the clouds for me here. And it's it's this beauty, and in that sense, it's like one of the quieter songs on here, but it screams the loudest to me.
Love that. We move on to Anything More Than Human featuring Era.
This, for me, feels like the coin flip of a could-have-been single that may follow up as such, but didn't quite make the cut early on. It has everything about it feels a little more straight ahead in terms of just like a Bad Omens collaboration with another artist. Like, I think it's maybe a little bit more reeled in than Van, but it's on the same wavelength of The Drain, where it doesn't feel like it's an era song in the same way that like Van feels like a poppy song in the foreground with Bad Omens in the background. This feels a little more evened out in that way. And it also isn't, nothing about it feels overtly complicated. Like, this very much feels like a verse chorus breakdown type track. It feels like an easy win with a metalcore crowd. Like, everything about this feels like it was meant to be, or still could be in some capacity, the next full-blown single from this record if the band decides to do so. And I think Era's style just like meshes very well overall with Bad Omens. Everyone feels very in sync on this song.
I totally agree. I could certainly see this being a single at some point. I'm very curious what this album cycle looks like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like, obviously everything about this whole endeavor is so abstract that it's hard to pinpoint exactly what choice they'll make going forward. Whether this is meant to be a period in the era and then we are, or should mentally prepare ourselves to just move on, or this may be something that carries out a little further, in the same way that like the Death of Peace of Mind was something where it's like Just Pretend was a single months and months later, based maybe on reception or like this idea of like dragging the era on further. Like, it's hard to say. Yeah.
But no, it's a fucking damn good song. Everything on here is fucking really solid, including Digital Footprint, which is a 4-minute instrumental.
I'll push back a little bit. That Digital Footprint for me feels like a lesser version of Loading Screen. It doesn't quite pack the same emotional punch for me. It doesn't, as an instrumental track, really like resonate in the same way that other one does. I don't dislike it. I just don't find it to be as much of a revelation as I found Loading Screen to be.
I still find it really listenable, though. I think overall it's just got like a good feel to it, and I'm not necessarily at that point looking for it to capture anything emotionally. I just think it is a catchy ass instrumental, I guess, and that's fine too. We end on Nervous System, which again is just track 10. We again tackled this backwards, featuring Iris.exe, someone we find ourselves talking about a lot lately, most recently a pair of singles from Space Cowboys' latest album, before on songs from The Acacia Strain, Vatican, way more, a lot of writing credits throughout their scene as well. And as I learned just Googling Iris.exe, this artist got their name from a Mega Man character.
Interesting.
Which I thought was a little neat. I didn't know that.
It is cool, honestly.
Iris.exe appears apparently in Mega Man Battle Network 6. Have you played that, Sam?
I have not played the Battle Network games.
Maybe
no.
Noah was a fan.
It's possible.
And that's...
You think that's what drove him to want to...
Noah's never said he's not a Mega Man fan.
I would argue it's probably the immense musical talent that Iris.exe shows on just about everything that they've worked on at this point.
Yeah, at this point, I see Iris's name on something and I'm seated.
Right.
I need to know what it hears like, what it sounds like, rather. And that was sort of the case on this album, too. Like, when I saw this track listing, I saw an entire song for Iris.exe, I would assume, just after having heard Van, that being the pattern that the band would move forward with.
Right, the impression we've been given.
Right. I saw that and I'm like, I gotta know what that sounds like. And it turns out to be one of the standouts for me on this album. I think anything Iris touches turns to gold.
What's interesting
is no
as well
exception to that.
Is following that See You Space Cowboy album, that's back-to-back times that Iris EXE has essentially been trusted entirely with the vocal duties on a track by a band that isn't theirs.
Right.
Which shows sort of the level of trust that these other artists have with Iris EXE to produce something incredibly memorable, which I think they've done again with the Nervous System, which once again, just to sort of tie into the conceptual nature just one last time here, I think this is once again is sort of speaking to this sort of like battle between the brain, the mind, the nervous system, and like oneself. And I think Iris EXE does an incredible job of putting a voice to that.
Well said. And that is the Concrete Jungle OST. I think it lived up to expectations, even though it was, I don't know, in the hours leading up to the release of this, still hard to predict ultimately what it would be.
Right, because I think we've come to expect a certain something from deluxe editions of albums. Like, our expectations have been level set, and I think something like this really sort of like reinvents what you can do with the idea of reimagining an album or re-releasing it and breathing new life into it and making it feel fresh and expanding upon it. And I think this is what Bad Omens does, is they make it feel fresh, they expand upon it, they integrate other artists, and in that way they make something familiar feel new and larger than life all over again. And that feels like an astoundingly difficult task to take upon yourself in reference to an album that is so renowned as The Death of Peace of Mind. So it really is an incredible amount of respect for this band for taking on that task and then knocking it out of the park, and for all of the artists that they incorporated and how well they fit in, and the overall team that they've surrounded with themselves, and just the level of success this band continues to find by letting their creativity drive all of their decisions. And ultimately, you pray and hope that other artists continue to look up at Bad Omens and feel influenced by not just their style, but their choices and their overall vision of how to approach music.
Bad Omens remain unstoppable.
No argument here. Marcus, it's been an episode. We'll see everybody again. Not next week. We'll be on a short break, but the following week. And I'm sure we'll have plenty of news and new music to talk about. Once again, you can follow us at SOTS Podcast. If you want to support, you can go to patreon.com/SOTS Podcast. Leave 5 stars on Apple or Spotify. Thumbs up on YouTube. Leave a comment. Let us know what you thought about this album. Very curious for people's overall feelings. Have a good week. Bye.
Good play.